Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. So our team partnered with ONWRDS to help them develop an analysis of carbon capture technologies.
Hi, everyone. I'm Paige Holmes. I am a student at Mesa Community College, and I am studying to get a degree in Bachelor's of Science of Forestry.
I'm Bryce Campbell. I'm a first-year Solutioneer here, and I'm studying business with a minor in sustainability.
And my name is Madison Harris. I'm a senior here at ASU. I'm the project lead for this team, and I'm studying sustainability, business, and urban planning. And we also just wanted to mention our other two Solutioneers, OCN and Ethan, who weren't able to present today, but they had some awesome contributions throughout the semester. And a huge shout out to Jacob, who's on the Zoom call. He helped out a lot as our Solutioneer mentor.
So ONWRDS is the company that we partnered with. We chose to go with them because they focus on sustainability issues and are trying to innovate supply chain management to reduce their overall carbon footprint. We had the opportunity of working with Spencer Staliga, the founder of ONWRDS, and we also had the opportunity to speak with Tanya De Silva. She was our main source of contact with the project partners.
So the purpose of the project was really to create awareness about consumer level carbon offsetting through the creation of an at-home algae bioreactor, which kind of looks like just one of these devices here on the right. So ONWRDS wanted this device to be accessible to the average consumer. They wanted it to be cost friendly to everyone. And they wanted to make sure these devices and this algae was actually capturing carbon, and that we could measure this and track it, and that if these devices could do that to scale, could they be labeled as a carbon offset? But really overall, ONWRDS just want to create awareness and educate the public about something that everyone can do to reduce their carbon footprint.
So in order to address those challenges that Bryce pointed out, this is our solution. If you want to follow along, that's our report there. That's kind of how our presentation will go through there. So our first solution is calculating the carbon capture capability of the device itself, and we'll tell you how we did that. And then we also conducted a cost-benefit analysis, which is compiled here in this report. We explored different carbon capture and carbon offset ventures that the company can take and kind of weighed the pros and cons of each.
So our project vision was to have the team assist ONWRDS in exploring various routes to offset carbon for their stakeholders. The project mission was to have the team inform ONWRDS about the carbon sequestration potential of the algae bioreactor device that they provided us with.
So our first objective was to calculate the carbon sequestration of this prototype. So we wanted to get some quantitative and qualitative calculations from that. So we met with Dr. Rittman, who's a professor here at ASU. He works with an algae lab, and due to time constraints, we weren't able to physically test the reactor, but we were able to work with some formulas, get some calculations, which Madison will touch on briefly. So those experiences led us into our second objective, which was to just explore some alternative carbon capture options, and we set out to research 3 alternatives, and we ultimately did 4.
So this is our cost-benefit analysis matrix compiled into one easily readable chart here. As you can see, the columns are different qualitative metrics. Those were commonly research. So we looked into things like accessibility, cost, the capability of capturing carbon and the scale of that, whether or not it can count as an offset, and then also labor and time. As you can see, we researched 5 different technologies here, and they all have different pros and cons, which we're going to take you through now. Starting with the ONWRDS device. So this is the prototype that our project partner sent us. So as you can see, there are some pluses and negatives to this, but the main setback is that it can't capture a significant amount of carbon at this scale. In order to find that, we use this formula from Dr. Rittman that Bryce mentioned earlier. common formula used to calculate the carbon capture potential of algae. And applying the measurements of this device, we calculated that it can only capture about 0.019 kilograms per day. And in the scale of a whole year, that's a little over 1/2 of a kilogram of carbon, which is pretty insignificant, especially relative to other options. So with that being said, there are also some positives to this device, like accessibility and cost. And like we mentioned earlier, those are both still factors that the company thought were important, and we think are important as well. So both the pros and cons should be considered here.
So the first alternative that we looked at was large-scale algae. So we're talking 1,000-acre farms, 2,500-acre farms. These are not accessible or cost-friendly to the average consumer, but they are to scale. So they capture a ton of carbon, and they can be counted as a carbon offset. On the complete opposite side of the scale, we have houseplants. So houseplants are super accessible, they're cost-friendly, but plants overall, they do capture carbon, just not enough. So you can buy as many houseplants as you want, they're just not going to capture a lot of carbon, so they cannot be labeled as an offset. Additionally, we have composting. So composting is really middle of the road for a lot of the categories that we looked at. And composting is really great. It does offset, or it reduces emissions, but it's really hard to track and to measure, especially when done to scale. So because we can't track it, it also cannot be counted as an offset.
Unlike composting, our last alternative, forestry, can be counted as offsets and is often highly considered and thought of in terms of carbon offsetting. However, forestry is not easily accessible to the general population, and it can typically be quite costly.
So with these considerations and with our research, this is how it kind of applies to a bigger or global scale. So in regards to SDGs, these two are closely aligned with our project. The first one being SDG 3, which has to do with airborne pollution. A lot of these technologies not only sequester carbon, but they also have the potential to improve air quality a lot. The other is number 13, which has to do with reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
So our first recommendation to ONWRDS is to diversify their offset portfolio. So these algae bioreactors, they're great. They do capture some carbon, but even to scale, they just don't capture a lot. And so we recommend just looking into just some other options, such as large-scale algae or forestry, for example. We also don't recommend marketing the device as offsetting carbon. So these devices, they're all on the consumer end. And so it's really hard to track and measure all the algae, all the carbon that's being captured. We just don't have access to that. And so we can't label these devices as an offset. So rather, we really should use this device to educate about the powers of algae, educate and bring attention to the world of carbon offsetting, make consumers interested in this topic so that hopefully down the road, they will want to act and reduce their carbon footprint.
So taking into consideration our research on large-scale offsetting of carbon, it's not easily accessible to everyone. So here are 3 realistic ways that you can offset carbon from the comfort of your own home. 1, you can reduce your heat by 1 degree Celsius to reduce energy consumption by 8% per year. 2, you can decrease your CO2 by 300 to 1,600 kilograms per year by changing over to a plant-based diet. And 3, if you were to choose to hang your clothes rather than drying them, you can save approximately 153 kilograms of carbon dioxide per year. If you want to find out your carbon footprint and ways you can reduce that footprint, you can follow the link below, carbonfootprint.com.
All right, and that's all we have for you guys. Do you have any questions? Thank you.
Okay. So we have one question over here. Thank you, guys. My question is, did you look at going vertical with the algae and producing algae, like similar to vertical farming, or it would pick up with land. Potentially, you could implement it in cities where land is really not super available. So did you look into going vertical at all with this technology?
We didn't really look into vertical algae farms for the scope of this project, but I've looked into it like on my personal time, and it is definitely very innovative, and it addresses the problem of like land use. So yeah, I think that that's something that could potentially be looked into if they do decide to go with large scale algae.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So you use the phrase counts as an offset. What's the bar for it counting as an offset, and to whom? Because the first device seemed like it was for home use, but then we're also looking scaled for maybe cities or large industries. So what is the range that ONWRDS is looking to affect, and how are you measuring that?
Yeah, so that kind of gets into semantics. There's certain standards that have to be met for something to be considered an official offset. And something like the at-home device can certainly offset because it does sequester some carbon, but to use the term offset, it kind of has that connotation of like an official offset that can be purchased by a business or an industry. So we kind of just advise that they stay away from that term and maybe use it as more of an educational device, as something that's still keeping consumers conscious of their carbon footprint and maybe helping them minimize their emissions, but it's not really significantly offsetting in the official, use of the word.
Certain level to make it official?
So for
Yeah.
a farm, for example, like a large scale farm, the number is somewhere like 100,000 metric tons annually. It's somewhere in that range. So for like on the market, like to be bought and sold as a carbon offset, you would have to like the smallest farm that you would use is like 1,000 acres. So that's like, we're talking very, very large here.
Yeah.
It's somewhere in that range.
And it's not necessarily just about scale too. There's a process of validation and verification that goes on that some people are probably aware. That's a bit complicated for these at-home devices. Thank you for your question.
Awesome, thanks you guys. I thought those devices were really pretty too, the pictures of them.